So let's get into chapter 10, which is talking about trade balance and capital flows. So the trade balance we kind of touched on already with GDP, which is exports and imports. So the balance of trade is that gap, if any, between the nation's exports and imports. Which one is a country doing more of? So what we're going to be looking at is a little bit more specifics into that. So we could look at the merchandise trade balance, which is the balance of trade looking at only at goods. We could trade other things, and that's where the current account also comes in. So this is where we're looking at the trade of goods and services. We're also going to be looking at the flow of international income, and we're also going to be looking at foreign aid. So the current account is going to be looking at more than just goods and services. It's also looking at, hey, if I invested in another country and they're going to be returning to me money, that is going to be accounted for in the current account balance. We also have foreign aid. So if you gave foreign aid to another country, right, then you are giving them money. So that's going to affect the account balance for your country, right? So the balance is really just how much money you have in your account, all right? So if you're giving money to another country, that's going to change how much balance that you have. We also have unilateral transfers. These are where payments that the government, private charities, or individuals make in which they send money abroad without receiving any direct good or service. So basically what happens here is they are sending money to somebody, just like a transfer payment, like unemployment insurance, where the government's going to give money to somebody, but they're not expecting anything in return. Same thing happens here, where unilateral transfer. Uni meaning one way, so you give money, you don't expect anything in return, so you're just transferring money there. So what else could we trade? We also could trade financial capital. So we talked about capital meaning machines. Financial capital is going to mean money. So financial capital is going to be the international flows of money that facilitates trade and investment. There is a connection between trade balances and the international flow of financial capital, and that it is so close that economists sometimes describe the balance of trade as the balance of payments. So basically what's happening here is that when we are trading things like goods and services, or we're trading things like currency or investments, since we're trading these things, we like to classify this as just a balance of payments. Like everything's going to have a flow to it. So picture this. If we were to be in our home country and we were to receive a payment for exports, okay? So we're going to send out the exports. We're going to send them to whoever's buying them. We're going to send those goods to them, and we get the money. So let me change this up. We're going to use green for money. So money's coming in, goods are going out. That's an export. Now, what can you do with this extra money? Is you could do different things with it. You could send out payments for imports, right? And so they're going to send you imports. That could also happen. So exports and imports. You can also invest in a different country. So basically what's happening here is that you are investing your income. So let's say you collect that money for the exports, and you take that money and you invest it in another country. Okay? So basically what's happening here is, let's picture two banks. We have a bank in the United States and a bank in Europe. So if you are collecting money in your bank here, right, you're basically letting that money sit here, and then you could send it over here to Europe. And let's say you can earn more money by investing in this bank than in the US. So what you're going to do is you're going to send your investment income, you're going to send it to Europe. Okay? So this screen here, investment income paid. So you're taking your money from the US and you're putting it in Europe. Okay, you're sending it over there. Now what's going to happen here is that your money is now in Europe's bank, or maybe you're investing into the government of Europe, right? There's different things that you can invest in. So you have your money over here, they're using it for whatever purposes, all right? And they're going to pay you an interest rate. So basically, you're not just giving the money for free. You're doing it so you can earn money because you're smart. So you're going to get this money back in the form of interest. And so when you are collecting on your investment, so you are getting your investment from abroad, this right here is your interest. Okay, so let's go through it again. You get in the exports, right? The money paid from exports. You get that in. You transfer that money to the rest of the world in terms of investment. Okay, now what do? They're going to get this money from the imports that you bought, and then they are going to invest it back into your country because they have money over here that they want to invest in your country. So they're going to take their investment income that they got and they're going to invest it into your country. Now, you are taking their money, investing it and doing whatever you want with it, and then you're going to pay them back interest. So this goes both ways. You can invest in that country and they can invest in you. And it's going to go both ways, and you are moving this income around to where it is a flow. Whenever you have excess money just sitting around, you're better off sending that somewhere else to collect interest. And then when they get that money, they can then buy other things. And when they buy things, you can then invest it. So it's a literal flow, very similar to the circular flow, but now we're talking about the flow of money and goods and services in the sense of different countries. Okay? So that's the flow of financial capital. It can get pretty overwhelming, but that's really what it is just exports come in, imports go out, right? Like that money that's moving around there. Okay, we're also doing that, and we're doing the same thing with investments. You can invest in another country and get interest. Another country could invest in you and you pay out interest. So this is the flow of financial capital. So we are going to create a formula called the National Savings and Investment. The National Savings and Investment Identity is basically the total of private savings and the public savings. The public savings meaning how much is the government saving. So what this is really just a supply and demand curve. You have a supply of financial capital, which is how much money you're saving, right? You as a person, how much are you saving? And then how much extra are you getting from the exports and imports, right? When you get the exports, you're getting the money, and then you pay out imports, right? So how much extra are you having there? So that's the supply of financial capital. The demand for financial capital, that is your interest, your investment, but it's also the government and taxes. Because if the government's wanting to spend money, they could be wanting to invest. They could borrow money in order to pay for something. So the difference between the spending and the taxes will be how much the government is borrowing. So right here, this is how much the government borrows. So supply of financial capital is equal to the demand for financial capital. If the government spending is more than taxes, then they are spending this much and they're taxing this much. So the government's like, hey, we have $100, but we want to spend 1,000. Okay. Well, if you want to spend 1,000 and you only have 100, you need to demand financial capital. If your taxes are more than your government spending, you're collecting $1,000, but you're only spending 100. This is where you can actually be a supplier of financial capital. You actually have more money that you're not using. you could save it. So this is the National Savings and Investment, okay, where you are balancing out the supply and demand of financial capital. We could also incorporate the trade deficit and the trade surplus. The trade deficit, the only way that the domestic investment can exceed domestic savings is if capital is flowing into country from abroad. So a trade deficit could mean your imports are more than your exports. So you're spending more money there, to where if you are having a domestic investment that's exceeding your savings, then that means that capital is flowing into your country from abroad. Basically, if we're going back to what's happening with the flow of financial capital, if you have more imports than exports, that means that you're buying things from other countries. So you're literally sending money to another country. And then they're going to collect this money, they're saving it, and they're going to invest it. So when we have a trade deficit, usually what's going to happen next is that the people are going to invest to where capital is flowing into the country from abroad. Let's compare this with the trade surplus. So a trade surplus is going to be where the domestic savings, both private and public, is higher than the domestic investment. So basically what's happening here is your exports are more than your imports. So if your exports are higher, that means you're receiving more money that you're paying out. So you have extra money that you're holding on to. So your savings, okay, is higher than in your investment. And that extra financial capital that you have in your hands will then be invested abroad. You can now bring in the money from other countries and then invest it somewhere else. Okay? So that's how a trade surplus works, is that whenever you're selling more than you're spending, you can get this money and invest it somewhere else. If you have a trade deficit, this is where you're sending money out to get the imports. They get that money and invest it back into you and in your banks. A recession tends to make a trade deficit smaller or a trade surplus larger. Basically what's happening here is that when you have a recession, usually what happens is that your prices will go down. And if your prices are down, right, what do people want to do? They want to buy at the cheaper price. So sure enough, prices go down, everybody starts buying your stuff. So if everybody starts buying your stuff, this is going to be an increase in your exports. So this will increase the trade surplus. While a period of stronger economic growth tends to have a trade deficit larger or a trade deficit smaller. What this means is when you have a period of economic growth, more people have more money. And what do you normally do with more money? You buy more stuff. So you buy more consumption and you buy more from other countries. So because you're buying more from other countries, your imports are going to be higher. And if your imports are higher, then you're going to have a trade deficit. So a recession could lead to a trade surplus. Economic growth could lead to a trade deficit. All right. In the next video, we'll continue on talking more about trade surplus and deficits. I'll see you there.